Exactly. Hello. Good afternoon.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're doing amazing. I hope everyone can hear me.
We can hear you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for the response. You're welcome to this third week. For those who have been joining in, you're welcome once again. This is introduction to my hosted by Ian Studio, teacher, and we've had quite interesting discussions about 2 weeks ago. Today is the third week. Sure. Just so you know, the meeting is being recorded. This is just so that we can have something to chew on after this seminar. All right, thank you very much for joining us once again. By way of introduction, my name is Abibu, and I'm privileged to be your host. I'm also learning about science communication today too. I'm a postgraduate student here at University University and personality. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, as usual, let's get to meet ourselves. You can just put in where you're joining us from the chat box and let us know where you're joining us from. I would start. Oh, okay, Wanda says I'm not audible. So sorry about that. Check that. Please get apologies, please. I hope you can hear me now. Hello, Lucky, just let me know if you can hear me good enough. Or you might try to boost the volume from the device too. Oh, I'm so sorry, Philippa. I'm so sorry. Yes. Oh, so sorry about that. Okay, maybe I'll just try and increase my volume. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about that. Please try and check the audio from the device too, because I think it's a little too loud here for me. So sorry. All right. So I hope you can hear me now. I think it's check my voice. Please, by way of introduction, let's just put in location in the chat and I already have and what time of the day it is. It's 3 p.m. here. Like in evening, we have to evening here in Nigeria. So please let us know where you're joining us from. I'm so sorry about the sound situation. I hope it's better now. We're also we have a faces very soon. I will get to the gist of what we are here to do today. Please let me know in the chat if it's better now, if you can hear me now. All right. I want to believe that sound is still very bad.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Ronka she's trying to sort out the sound.
All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me now. I'm really sorry about the sound situation. I guess it's better now, right? Hey, I'm so sorry, Philippa. Thank you. Thank you for the response. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. I hope it's better now. Okay, thank you. So we can fly. I don't know if to start from the beginning, but let me just start ahead. This is the Introduction to Science Communication webinar hosted by Alpha Innovation Studio situated here in Nigeria. You're welcome to the third week. It's the third week we've had very interesting discussions since this webinar started. Thank you to everyone who's joined from the first week. Today will be no exceptions. All right, by way of introduction, my name is Aderonke Adelu, and I'm a postgraduate student at the Redeemers University in Osun State, Nigeria. Also, I'm an personality. So let's get to the introduction proper. As usual, let's get to know where you're joining us from. Thank you. I think I can see Daniel's on, and I want to know what time of the day it is wherever you're joining us from. Right there in Nigeria, it is 3:09 p.m. That's evening time. So for the others, let us know where you're joining us from. Daniel has done that. Daniel Kenny, thank you so much for joining. Adejuwon, wow, it's good to see someone from Lagos, Nigeria, 3 p.m. also. Emmanuel Bake, thank you. It's around 2 p.m. now. And also learned last week that Ghana is like an hide of Nigeria. So good. He's now behind Nigeria. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you, Emmanuel Bake, for joining us. Well, I'll make a mistake. Okay, thank you, Philippa. It's good to see you. Wow. Time is 4 p.m. She's joining us from Austria. Thank you so much, Philippa, for joining us. And while we get while that is going on, thank you, Light Olaji Bay from Lagos, Nigeria, 3 p.m. Yeah, thank you, Tyler Christiana from Enugu, 3:10 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. No one gets tired of saying thank you. just, just get used to that. While we are getting along with this, last week we talked about humanizing science. I just want us to have a recap. I want us to have a recap of what we've done so far. We have done why science communication the first week, where we basically had a kind of introductory course into science communication, and we had a panel session, and we had keynote speakers from everyone. Thank you so much, Emma Clemency, for joining us from Johannesburg in South Africa. Time is 4 p.m. Yeah, thank you so much. Justina, good to see you. Thank you for joining us from Tanzania, 5 p.m. Thank you, Kadiatu from Mali. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. I hope I got that right. Thank you for joining us again today. Okay, our first poll will be coming up shortly. Please, I don't know if our host is ready. Is going to launch the first poll. Please, I would like us all to respond. We'll find it shortly. Thank you, Dr. Ibiali, for joining us from the University of Ibadan here in Nigeria. All right, the poll is on. Who am I? Who I am. So please, let's click. Let's submit the poll. I think it's on our screen. I'm saying it right now in front of our screen. If you're a journalist, please indicate. If you're a mass communication professional, an undergraduate student, a postgraduate student, an early career researcher, please do well to let us know. And like I announced earlier, the meeting is being recorded so that we can have something to chew on after now. So we can have something to chew on. The recordings for last week and last 2 weeks webinars available in our mail. We can, for those of us just joining in and would like to be a part, we can do well to read to sorry, you can do well to go listen to this webinar. They are quite impactful. It's been an insightful session, I must tell you, and I'm certain that at the end of this seminar, at the end of today, and by the end of this whole webinar, we're going to have something valuable for our time. So I want to believe that we've answered the first poll. All right, thank you very much. From the poll, we have about 7% of everyone here. We have 7% journalists, 11% they're mass communication professionals, and we have 7% undergraduate student. Also, we have the large number. We have quite a number of postgraduate students here, and that's a good one because I expect that, like the first class we had, science communication starts from when you conceive the idea of your research. And also we have early career researchers. That's a very good one too. And we have some others, 14%. Please, as you're joining us, yeah, that's all. Okay, so let's launch the second. All right, from that response, from the statistics we have more postgraduate students and early career researchers. I would like to ask the same question we asked last week. What do you intend doing with science communication? What prospects do you see with science communication? You can share that in the chat box so that we can all see it. What do you hope to achieve with science communication? Then also, while we do that, we can also have reflections from last week. What are those things that stood out for you and last week's. So last week we talked about how to find science stories. Just for those who couldn't join us for some reasons last week, please kindly share with us what's at some of the take home or some of the things that you've had to do differently in the course of the week. And or what are those things that you learned from last week? You can do well to share with us in the chat box. And you can also put in the chat box what you feel, I mean, as an early career researcher or as a postgraduate student or whatever class you belong to, let us know um, what you hope to achieve with science communication. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. I see some persons just joining us newly. You can do well to introduce yourself also. And I'd like to know if you have anyone joining us for the first time today. Please let me know if there's anyone joining us for the first time today. We'll be kickstarting the webinar properly in a few minutes. So please let me know if let's know if there's anyone joining us for the first time. And for those that are just joining us now, I mentioned earlier that the recordings for last week, that is how to find science stories. And the first week, which is why science communication, the links to the recordings are available in our chat, in our mail. So please let's do well to go through them. And for those of us who've joined and maybe you missed out a point or two that you love to listen to again, you can do well to listen. Thank you, Taufik. Good afternoon to you too. Well, Taufik, thank you for joining us. Where are you joining us from? You can let us know and what time of the day it is for you too there. Thank you, Olaitola Jibe. For Olaitola Jibe, well, I don't know if Olaito is an early career researcher, a postgraduate student, or an undergraduate student. She says that, I don't know if it's he or she, but I want to believe it's a she. Yeah, she wants to be able to communicate research to relevant stakeholders in the language they can understand, and that's very good. Thank you, Taufik. Taufik indicated that he's joining us from Ibadan, Nigeria. That's a good one. Thank you very much. Also, the meeting is being recorded. I think I've mentioned that, and we can also. Okay. Without further delay, I'll just introduce our teacher, I guess, for today. Okay, for some others, they are aware, they know who it is not a new face. For everyone who's been joining, is a new face. For those who are just joining, our Our speaker for today is Fikayo Oyewale. He's a science communication officer at the African Center of Excellence for Genomics of Infectious Diseases in Nigeria, right in Redeemers University in Nigeria. He's the creative director at Alpha Innovation Studios. He was a panelist when we talked about, the first week when we talked about why science communication, and last week he taught us about how to find science stories. But today will not be an exception. So today is going to be giving us the gist on how to write about science, and he himself is not a novice in that area. He's done some amazing stuff. He shared with us one of such last week, and today he's going to, I see he's getting ready to unleash and give us maximum value for our time. So please welcome with me Fikayo Oyewale. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adeoke. Thank you everyone for coming around. It's a delight to welcome you here. It's been a very interesting journey with you in this introduction to science communication workshop. And I want to appreciate everyone that has been here for the last two, and now this session. And for everyone that is just joining us, it's good to have you here. Today we are discussing how to write about science. Before I go into the conversation, I would like to give us some updates. During our first session, which was titled Why Science Communication, there was a conversation here that we should have a compendium, like a resource that we can use as a source, as a go-to area, we should have a go-to resource for people from Africa that want to learn about science communication, or that they want to see case studies about science communication. I'm happy to say that, and I remember we threw it at Linda, one of the panelists then, that she should try and drive this. I'm happy that after that conversation, one of us here, Wealth Okete, reached out to Linda, and the three of us, Wealth, Linda, myself, we had a conversation earlier on, and we thought that this is something that is interesting, that we should really drive, we should work towards making it a reality, that it will be good for us. And what we're looking at least for now, we're thinking of having a living platform. Fine, we ultimately later on we can say we are going to have a publication, but then we think that we should have a resource that would be like case studies for science communicators that they can be able to access. And to get this done, we think that it should be good that people are allowed to share. We felt we should try it open to every one of us here. If you have done any bit of science communication, what have you done? How did you do it? We are going to create a template to capture all of these things, and we are going to put them on the website. We are working on the website already. The website is going to be called scienceunshelved.com. So it should be a place where all of us can put, if you have an article that you wrote, a story that you wrote, it's something, a place where you can really put these things. And in addition, we are actually thinking of we are planning to have something after this workshop. We thought that we shouldn't just have the workshop and say this is how to do it, and then just leave everybody just go and do it if we wish. We felt that we should create an ecosystem that would enable everybody that has participated in this workshop to be able to put into use what he or she has learned, and we should also be able to showcase that. So we are planning that even though this workshop will end next week, 29th, that's June 29th, that we should give ourselves a month, that at the end of July, probably from something July 26th to July 28th, we should now have a way of bringing all of our outputs to showcase it, and people that actually produce any science communication output within that period, we would also be able to give them personalized feedbacks. We've gotten a number of people that have volunteered to really share with us, to share their expertise in, to use their expertise for us, so that we can really can be able to get feedback from experienced people. So I want to request this, that as many as will be interested in volunteering, at least first, whether you want to volunteer as an editor or one of the people that will work on collating those stories, you should volunteer. I don't know if Wealth, would you be willing to have people contact you, so that probably you should, if you would like to, would you like that, please? I know I didn't ask you this in person, but I just thought that probably I should ask you now.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I think that's fine.
Okay, so Wealth, please drop your email address then in the chat box, so that people that are interested can just drop you an email. If you want to volunteer as an editor, you want to be able to edit people's ideas, and then if you think that you have an experience already, or you have some experience already, or you would want to share your own experience, even though you are just starting out, the things that you do now, please feel free to get across to us. We know this is a continuum, where this is not just for today. We'll still announce this next week, and over time, we're still going to try and make this something that is really useful. And I believe this is going to help us. Most, at least, we have something that is localized, African, and that can be a go-to place for people. So thank you. I'll go to my presentation now. Our topic is how to write about science. And I'll share my screen. Mamadou was asking about the presentation. The link to the presentation was in the email that was sent, I think the day after the webinar, and it's also in the website. It's still available in that link that was in the link for last week's workshop. If you check that, if you click that link, you'll see the recordings and also the presentation. So I'll share my screen now. Hold on, please. Okay. I believe we can see my screen. So how to write about science. Our conversation today would follow this format. We are going to talk about the fact that simple is not simplistic. Science writing is different from scientific writing that many of us will be familiar with. And then how to write about science now. We share some tips, and then we'll still go back to an example from a completed project. So I said simple is not simplistic. We said making science communication is about making science accessible, making scientific issues, scientific topics accessible to non-experts in that area. So when we say simple, we are saying that something that is simple can be easily understood by people, but it's different from something that is simplistic. That is something that when you look at it, it's very superficial. And then using the analogy that I shared the other day, that science communication is like removing the shell out of a boiled egg. You want to serve somebody boiled egg, you're removing the shells from the eggs, so that the person has ready access to the eggs. And then if you're saying something is simplistic, you're trying that simplistic can also be considered as dumbing down. Many scientists are scared that how am I going to break this thing down? I mean, if you are dumbing it down, that means, like, for example, you are trying to teach people that this is how you put the eggs inside your mouth. I mean, if you write something, if you want to present, if you present eggs to me and you're asking me, okay, now you take it from the plate, you move your hand up and you put it inside your mouth. That means you're telling me that I don't even have brains, so I can't think properly for me to know that this egg, I'll put it inside my mouth. So what we're saying is that simple is not simplistic. Let's start from this context, that if you're saying we want to write about science, want to communicate science, we are not just making it like either, we are not making it something that is, we are not doing it with the assumption that our audience are dumb people. And then we are also not doing it in a way that is just wishy-washy, that is not thorough. We are making the content, whatever we're writing, simple to understand. That means is easily understood by people. It's simple enough for people to understand. So science writing is different from scientific writing. And it's good to know that a number of us here are professionals in scientific field. When we write as scientific people, most times our audience, they are specialists in our field. So they understand what exactly we are. If we use technical words, they understand those technical words that we use. But then if you read science writing, most of our audience are not specialists in our field. They are specialists in other fields, but they are not core specialists in our own field. So if you write and you assume that everybody should be able to understand, after all the people that you see every day, they know all this technical, they have the understanding of all these technical concepts that you're writing about, then you'll be making a mistake. Then for the audience of our scientific writings are usually people that need to read those things. As a professional, as an expert in the field, you want to be abreast of what is happening in that field. So when you say an article, you want to read it, because you need to be informed. But for science writing, the person that would read your article or that will watch your video or that would see your output, the person doesn't have to. There is nothing that compels the person, except there is something in what you have presented that is compelling enough for the person. They won't necessarily read what you've written or what you've put out there. So that's another difference. Also, when you see scientific writing, usually we have, after the abstract, which summarizes everything, usually you have an introduction, which gives a wide background of the topic, of whatever it's what you're talking about. But for science writing, you start with the most important information, because since the person that will read it, it's not compulsory for the person to go through whatever it is you've written. So the person is going to have to make a decision whether or not he will continue or she will continue with the reading within the first few seconds of it. So if that person is not, if that person is not enticed, if that person does not find the thing your write-up interesting enough at the beginning, the person is just not even, it's not going to continue with it. So that's why it's important to start with the most important information in science writing. Then scientific writing is often written in passive voice. The conversation is usually like maybe for, let's say you move samples, you say we moved the blood samples, our blood samples were moved from the hospital to the laboratory. If you're going to talk about that in a science writing output, you would say the scientists moved the blood samples from the hospital to the laboratory, because we said last week that you need to humanize your science, because people really want to know about people. They want to. It's not the blood did not move itself. It was somebody or some people that moved the blood. So you want to have this I mean, you want your voice, your communication to be active. And when you say active voice or active tone, it means that the subject of that sentence or the human character in that sentence comes as early as possible. Maybe it comes first, even before the verb, and then before the subject. Let's use that same example of blood and blood that was moved from the hospital to the laboratory. In that case, if we say that the blood was moved from the hospital to the laboratory, it means that the first thing that the person that is reading it is seeing is the blood. What is it about the blood? It's really not so much. You're not that's passive conversation. Let me just focus on the active part. If you're gonna say the active, if you're gonna change it to active, then you're saying that the people or the scientists moved the blood. That is, the scientists, they are the subjects. They are the ones that performed an action. And the action was move the blood. I mean, they moved something. What did they move? The blood was what they moved. That's the object. So when if you're writing about science, you want it to be active. I mean, if you're not writing, if your write up is not for scientific audience like that, and even for scientific audience, if you write it, if you have a blend of active and passive voices, it makes it richer, because the scientists are also human beings. They also understand things better when they are written in active voice. Then also scientific writing hardly expresses emotions. It's really straight to the point. You don't care about what you don't express what happens there. But if you're going to write if you're going to do science writing for non-experts in that field, then when you express emotions, when you put in feelings of either the scientist or the patient or people or stakeholders in that particular story, then it's something that is powerful. It's something that people readily connect with. It's a lot different. And then scientific writings are usually formal in nature, but then science writing is usually informal. So you want to know that these differences are not exhaustive. Let me just add this so that we can know that when we say we are writing about science, we will look at these things separately. So what's the structure of a science story when you want to write a science story? There are different structures, but our conversation today will be based on this Wall Street Journal structure, Wall Street Journal format, which is broken down into this: the lead, the note graph, the meat, that is the main body, and then the conclusion. I'll go into this in details afterwards. I know that journalists that are on the call, or mass communication professionals, will be very familiar with this. This is your tough, and I would step carefully so that I don't you don't say this guy is not a journalist. I'm learning to be one. So the lead, that is the first thing that people see apart from your heading. And what's it for? It's something that you use to catch the attention of the people, of your audience. When you write something about science, you want, and as I said earlier, the audience don't need to read it. So if you want them to read it, you need to catch their attention as early as possible. So what you're going to use to catch them has to come as early as possible in your conversation. And that can be an enticing short story. It can be a quote. It can be a description that is something that will catch their attention. And how do you make that happen? While you're thinking about your story, when you're writing your science story or your science article, your lead may not be the first thing you're going to write. That's the practical reality. It may not be the first thing you would write about. You will have thought about different components of your write up before you now come to say, okay, which one should I put first? So don't be scared. How do I get the lead? If you would want to get the lead, you may want to make a list of everything that is interesting or surprising or impressive or exciting or alarming or catchy about people that are related to that topic. you want as much as possible to make that story about people. You want it to be so for you to write your lead, you want to ask yourself, maybe after you have looked at all the components of your story, all the things you all the parts of it. Okay, what was interesting about it? What is interesting about the story, or about the stakeholders, about the people that are involved in that the story relates with? What are the things that is there anything interesting to you and that you think, or that you think will be interesting to the person that is going to read this article? Is there something that is exciting? Is there a surprise? Is there a surprise factor in this, in any part of this whole thing? Is there something that is impressive or alarming, like just like shocking, that when somebody looks at it, oh, is it so? So you want to find out about those things. You may want to make a list of those things. Then you now decide out of all of them, which one will you put at the top of your write-up. It may be a sentence, it may be your first sentence, it may be your first paragraph, but that's what the lead is for. It's to draw people in. Once they see it, to give they call it a hook. Sometimes what's draws people into one. Okay, this is cool. Let me check it. So it's something that people read within the first few seconds that they open your article, that they say it. Then the notes graph is something that that's where you explain the context of your story. Now the idea is when people come in, when people are attracted by a lead, when they say, okay, let me check what exactly is there. Why then you want to give them the purpose, because then that's what's going to help them to say, okay, am I interested in this purpose? Or then it's also help them to say, oh, yeah, this is exactly what I thought what I think I would like to know. Then that once you get that, they want to continue with you. So in the notes graph, you want to explain the context. What are just a few things that will help people to understand what exactly you're talking about. So with that, you share why you want to talk about the reason why you're writing that story. And with this, one of the things you will do is to summarize. That can be done in a sentence or in a paragraph, or depending on the kind of story you write. If it's a long feature story, maybe more than a paragraph even. This explanation of the context of your story, more than a paragraph. So of your story. The next thing is the meat. That is the main body of your story. That is usually the longest part of a science story, and it's gonna give context. It's gonna be a blend of a lot of things. Everything that you think will be necessary to make the person that is reading your story to be able to understand it. So you're gonna give the context. You're gonna give more context about the story. Then you're gonna insert quotes, maybe from people that are directly involved. We talked about kind of people that you can interview, or people that you can get quotes from last week. So I won't go into this so much now. So you insert quotes there. You also want to insert arguments. Let's say, for example, you're writing about something that we have different points of view, or that scientists are divided concerning on that issue. So you want to write arguments. You are going to insert the arguments of the different sides of the divide. And then you also want to include experiences of people's experiences. And you can insert those ones as probably some mini stories, just put a blend of those experiences. For example, let's say people have been talking, your story is something about a new maize variety, and the maize variety, the promise of that maize variety is that it's the productivity is let's say 30 or 50% more than what the farmers around that particular locality that they usually have. So you want to include people's experiences, maybe from the past, from the former, from the old maize variety that's common. Then you also want to include some other people's perspectives about their other experience about the fact that we were in this particular, we tested this small, maybe a small portion of that maize. Let's say this farmer has, let's say 2 hectares of land, and because it was just introduced to that variety, and they felt, how do I do it? I want to just check. Let me just test it with an acre of land. I'll test this maize variety and I'll plant it on an acre of land. So the person is now sharing, okay, this was what I got final on the farm on the portion of land where I cultivated our usual variety. And now when I cultivated on an acre of land, this was what I got. That's shared experience. The person we want to talk about maybe the extent of weeding that is required. The person we want to talk about, maybe the person talked about the color of the maize harvest. All those things you can put them inside the main body, and then you can, if you also have perspectives also, maybe perspective from specialists, from scientists, perspectives of people that are involved. We talked about different stakeholders that you can interview the other time last week. So it's inside the main body of the story that you're going to insert the perspectives. Also, you want to bring in facts and figures. And if you're saying that the maize is productive, or this new variety of maize is it produces more. The question is, what is definition of more? And then the farmer, if you're now explaining that farmer that planted on an acre of land, what he got from that acre of land was probably twice what he usually would have gotten using the former variety. Then that you're putting context. If you're not going to add more to that, instead of just saying twice, if you give that, okay, what do you usually get? What do you usually get from an acre? Let's say this is not correct though. This value I want to give now. Let's say they usually get like 1,000 kilograms of maize from an acre. You're not saying that okay, planting this new variety, they didn't just get 1,000, maybe they got 1,500 kilograms of maize. And the maize, the cobs are not tiny cobs, they are bigger. Or if with that you're injecting facts and figures into your story, and then that makes sense. It helps the reader to really make sense out of that. And then you want to use comparisons and interpretations. If you throw facts and figures at people anyhow, they will run away, because really, if somebody is not familiar with that particular context, with the facts that you're sharing, to just be flying over their head as you're saying it, they're just reading. And I'm sure probably you may be like me. When I'm reading if I'm reading something that is technical or an area that I'm not familiar with, when they're at the point where there are so many words, so many technical words, or maybe facts about that particular context, that story, as I'm just looking at those facts, I'm just skipping, like I'm upping to the next. What's the next text after this? All of these things. So you don't want to put so many facts and figures inside the story. You want to also be able to compare, give people comparisons and interpretations. You want to like put comparisons like that people are familiar with. Take for example, if you're writing about if you're writing about people that let me see use this as example. If you're saying that people get 1,000 kilograms, or let's say the amount of harvest is X, Y, Z. Let's use let's use our 1,000 kilograms. There's some people it's 1,000 kilograms. Like, okay, what is 1,000 kilograms? It's really not something that I can pick. But let's say instead you say that let's assume that four baskets of tomatoes. If your audience are people that are familiar with tomatoes, if you say 4 baskets of tomatoes are things that's the kind of quantity, that's the quantity of what they get, then that's something that they can really connect to. That's something that people can really understand, that they can really say, okay, this is what it means. Or let me give another example. Let's say you're talking about you want to say 25 inches. If I say the length of something is 25 inches, somebody will be like, okay, what is 25 inches? We have to like create a mental picture of a ruler. And let's say the person is now like me, that I'm not very familiar with inches, that I'm more familiar with centimeters. I just get stuck. Then I'm lost. But if instead of saying 25 inches length, if you say an arm's length is approximately 25 inches. People are familiar with that. So I can say, okay, 25 inches length. And then, for example, I remember in the early days of COVID, they used to talk about the at least 1 meter apart from somebody, from the next person. And quickly, they used to follow this up with pictures of people spreading their hands, like at least a arm away from you. You stretch your hand, the other person stretches his hand. That is ordinary, regularly, that's going to be about 1 meter long. So when you say separate the 1 meter apart, it's like, how do we compare that? So that's a way of comparing that. That's a way of putting it in context that people can understand. Also, if you want to say something like 40 inch height, it's like, okay, what exactly is that? A way of something you can use to compare 40-inch height, you can just say something that is taller than an office desk. Office desks are usually less than 40 inches. So if you say, if in your writing you say something like it's taller than an office desk, people can easily connect with that. So you want to include comparisons in your story, because that is what will help people to really understand and connect it properly with things that they see on a day-to-day basis. And you also want to add interpretations. Let's say you say something complex, you want to break it down, you want to at least dissect it in a way that people can really connect with it, that they can understand that. And as you're doing all of these things in your in the main body of your conversation, you want to be sure that you don't deviate from your theme, that you don't bring in unnecessary details, or you veer off, and then you have to now bring people back. It's not going to make the story interesting. It's not going to make your articles. It will make it to be difficult for your audience to flow with what you write, with the write-up, if you have to deviate from your theme. I think that's not good. So you're going to have a conclusion also. And the conclusion is where you tie everything together, where you help your audience to know what is going on. If it's an ongoing conversation, you want to tell this is in the conclusion that you're going to say, okay, this is what is going on now. This is where we are. This is the direction. This is what we should look at. And how are you going to do that? You will come by, you will tie it up again to the story's main points. You want to highlight what are the main things that you've talked about in that story. You want to summarize the main facts. You want to make a call to action. If your story is something that requires that, you want to that's where you tell people what's next. What should I do? Having read all of this, what can I do? Is it that you want to mobilize people to support a cause? Is it that you want to avoid something, or to do something, or to share an idea, or to say something? So that is where it's at the conclusion that you will do this. And then you can also, the conclusion, depending on what your story is like, you also can also project it to the future. If it's an unfolding discussion, if it's an unfolding conversation, you want to say, okay, this is what you're thinking of, or this is maybe when people should when would you have a follow-up story? When or what does the future hold for that particular story or for the context that you're bringing. So just I want to add a few tips to this, and these are things that are essential. You should avoid technical jargon. Technical jargons are things that are words, concepts, ideas that are only easily understood or that are readily understood by people within that field of expertise, but may not really be understood by people that are just even tangential or people nearby. For example, here now at AceGID, if you say genomics, in fact, let me just even say this, infectious diseases, for example. If you say infectious diseases, people within our context in AceGID here, many of them understand infectious diseases. But really, if I ask myself, and I remember this, many years ago, as an undergraduate student, if you ask me, I remember we had some courses then that we talked about what is infectious, what is not infectious. I had to read those things over and over again before I could even understand what's infectious. But that's just simple English to some people. But for somebody that is not in the health arena, or that is not very familiar in that space, then it's something that you have to really say, okay, infectious, infects. Does it infect me? But if I'm going to use that word, I would likely want to break it down. Okay, it's something that can be transmitted from one person to another, or that is something simpler. So, depending on your audience, you would need to avoid technical jargons. But then there are times that you have to put those words, those jargons inside your write-up. So when you put them, you make sure you explain them. You give an explanation of what's that exactly, what's that word or that phrase or that topic or that concept, what it means. You will need to do that. I mean, it should be immediately after, so that people don't get lost before you start looking for them. Once you put it, that technical word, you want to explain it almost immediately afterwards. Sometimes people would explain those things inside the brackets after those words, or it may be the next sentence, or it may be the next paragraph where you're gonna explain that. And then you also want to make meaningful comparisons. I talked about that earlier, so I won't dwell on that again. Then you should also use transitions to connect ideas, paragraphs, and all of that. Transitions are the things that make your story flow logically, that helps you to carry the person or the audience from point A to point C, or even to point B, because by the time somebody is reading your content, the person wants to be able to, doesn't have to start thinking, okay, so where were we? How does this connect with this? You want to make that transition in by yourself. You want to help them to be able to see this is the connection between this idea that I'm currently discussing and then the next idea. This is very important. And then you should also use relevant examples in your discussion. Don't just say everything and just leave it. You want to bring in examples that people can understand. You should share examples of, maybe, for example, how something was used, how the particular science or the particular thing that you're writing about, how it was used by someone, or how it is applicable in one context or the other. So you want to use relevant examples. And the word relevant is so essential here, because you don't just want to use any example because it's an example. You don't want to use an example that will throw people away. And so after reading the example, the person is now asking, okay, so what's the connection between this thing that I just read and where we are coming from, or this new place that we are? You want to be able to carry the people along carefully as you go on. So you should use relevant examples. Then you should use statistics sparingly. as scientists, very often, except maybe it's in certain contexts, you may not, you will not, that's when you will not talk about statistical value of what you're writing. That's what scientists are looking, what we're looking for as scientists. We want to say, okay, is this thing significant? What's the basis of your argument? Why did you say that this is, why are you coming to this conclusion? Why did you observe this? We want to put statistics natural. I mean, as scientists, we need to do that. That's how you prove what you're doing. But then in science writing, when you're writing stories for non-experts in your field, then you don't want to put a lot of statistics. You should use statistics sparingly, because statistics would scare people away. Many people would just be like, okay, so what exactly is the relevance of this? For example, if those statistics are necessary or will add value or help people to understand the context of your story, perfect. Include the statistics. But if the statistics are just not necessarily going to help the people to understand it better, if it's just additional information that is really not matter, then you can just stay away from the statistics. Now, when you give figures, it would be good to you should round off those figures to fractions that people are familiar with. For example, if I'm talking about 24.5% of people of attendees in this workshop, if 24.5% of us are early career researchers, if I say 24.5%, even as I'm telling you 24.5%, that I instead of saying that, I can say about 1 out of 4 attendees are early career researchers. Which one do you prefer? Can somebody talk? Let me hear you. Which one would you prefer? 24.5% or almost about one in 4 participants?
1 out of 4.
1 out of 4. Are you, sorry, can I ask you, are you an early career researcher, a journalist, or which one?
Mid-career.
Mid-career, imagine.
Mid-career researcher.
If a mid-career researcher will prefer 1 out of 4, why wouldn't me, a layperson, for example, not prefer 1 out of 4? So if I'm writing a story, instead of me just to put 24.5% for somebody that is not an expert or somebody that is even an expert, mid-career, I mean, 1 out of 4 is, it says it passes the information. Or if you don't want to be exact, because 24.5 is not up to 25, you can say almost or about. Now, because you're talking about people, you can say about. About is safe. So we can use words like about, over, let's say it is 25.6 or even 26 or 27. You can still say about or over. You can say over if it's 27. Over 1 out of 4 of the oranges was ripe or is ripe. So somebody can easily connect to that. We can also say close to or nearly. You can say approximately. You can say a little above or a little more than or a little less than. Those are things that you can use to round off figures that you can use to give comparison, help people to be able to connect easily with those things that you're writing, that you are talking about. And also, you should include every necessary detail in what you're writing. You don't want to write something and you say, because when you're writing, let's say it's your research, you have a lot of information. And if you're going to put all the information, for example, that you just have on ending pages, you will not be your deadline, you won't finish even till your deadline passes. So let's now say you want to write something how much of the details do you need to put? Put every detail that will help the reader to follow what you have written logically from the beginning to the end. You don't want to put content or parts of your discussion that people can understand A, they understand B because you connected them. Then you went ahead to go to D. There is this C that is missing. The C, you have it in your mind and maybe you've written it somewhere else because you understand it. The reader, the audience, they don't know your mind and they cannot read your mind. What they can read is what you put there or what you put in a way that they can infer from it. So that instead of jumping from B to D, because they need that C, then you should insert it there. It's a detail that is necessary for them. So include every detail that is necessary for people to connect logically with your story, to follow your story through logically. The other side of that conversation is don't put everything that you know about the topic. Because if you want to put everything, you won't finish it. And in fact, people will not read it because it will be too long. So that's the balance. That's how to balance it. Include every detail that will help people to understand what you're talking about. And then don't put everything you know. So some other tips. How do you get quotes? Because I've talked about quotes, talked about it last week, talked about it today. How do you get quotes? If you are writing a story that is not based on your own research, or even if it's your research, if you're interviewing somebody, you should when you ask people why questions, or you ask them how, those are questions that bring you things that you can easily that can get quotable quotes from. For example, if you say, what did you do? What did you do? The person will just say, I did this, did this. Those details may not be very, very relevant. You won't be able to use those things as quotes as much because there is no emotion inside what I did. There is really nothing about, there may not be anything catchy except if there is a shock, a surprise element in that thing that they did, then you can say, then maybe you can get a quote. But if you ask questions like why did you set out to do this work? They can tell you get question. When the answer that you can easily get things you can quote from answers to search, or you can if you say, how did you come about this? How did you do this? Those are things where you can easily get good quotes from that. And also, let me just say this: when you quote something in your article, in your story, what you're telling the reader is that, look, pay attention to this thing. This thing that is inside quote, these words that are inside these quotes, they are important. So pay attention. So if people are going to pay attention, what should they pay attention to? They should pay attention to content. The quote should be something that is understandable, and it should be interesting to a layperson. If the person cannot understand it, then how is it going to help them? Why should I pay attention to something that I cannot understand, or that is not even going to be interesting to me? So you would ask questions. For example, if you're asking a scientist or you're asking your team, why are we doing this? Say, because let me use an example of something within our context here at ASGI. Some time ago, I looked at a publication by our team. It was a publication on malaria, and the publication was talking. One of the things about that publication was that they were trying to check for antimicrobial resistance in malaria, in the malaria parasites. So when I ask questions, let's say I'm asking, okay, so why exactly? Why did you do this? And the scientist answers me saying something like, okay, we're trying to check for. The person answered by mentioning some of the things that they did, the kind of techniques that they carried out, the methods that they followed. And I'm like, okay, so why would you check for antimicrobial resistance? And the person said something like, well, because people, the malaria parasite resists or develops resistance to different drugs. Like, so what? So why is it, or how is it that the malaria parasite develops resistance? Then the person went on to now tell me that, okay, you see, people take anti-malaria drugs flippantly. For example, chloroquine used to be the main drug that we used to use to treat malaria many years ago. But then in 2010, Nigeria's Federal Ministry of Health said, I mean, they suspended its use because the pathogen then, malaria pathogen, was quite resistant to chloroquine. So they said they shouldn't prescribe it again. But so, and the expectation was that when they withdraw it from circulation like that, the pathogen will not continue to. I mean, it's not coming across the drug again, at least for some time. And with that, it's reversed. It's not. How do I put that in English so I'm not confusing things? Okay, once the pathogen is not exposed to chloroquine for some time, they start using other drugs. They call them combination therapy. They start using those ones. Those ones are effective at treating chloroquine. And as they keep using those things, it's expected that after some years, say 5 to 10 years, if you try chloroquine again, because malaria is not, treated, the pathogen is not exposed to that chloroquine over that period of time, it should have reversed. After like that 10 years, chloroquine may become effective again. It's been done in some other countries. So that was one of the reasons why they do it. But then their study was trying to check that after 5 years, for example, what is happening? Is that the reality? But then in their own study, they realized that no, chloroquine was still not effective. Why? In their study, they realized, based on some things that were happening in the country, one of that was that chloroquine was easily accessible. And I'm sure Nigerians here on this call, you would know that if you go to a pharmacy store, you say you want to buy chloroquine, you'll get it. So as long as people continue to use that chloroquine like that, it's not going to the expected consequence of that withdrawal is not going to happen. And from their study, it was still obvious that like 50% of the times the chloroquine will be effective, 50% it will not be effective. And somebody will go and buy drugs and say, no, this thing did not work. So if with that kind of explanation, I was able to get things. And if I want to write a quote, I can easily pick components of that conversation to say, okay, this is something that this person said, and I can use it. That will be understandable to the layperson. The layperson doesn't care about what processes you went through to define which areas of the pathogen, what the pathogen uses to infect the cell. No, it doesn't care about that. It doesn't even need to understand that. So, but if you talk about it in terms of that, if you're able to get the quotes from those other contexts that I mentioned, maybe for example from the place of how the availability of chloroquine in the market, how readily available it is, how that affects the effectiveness ultimately, then the person can easily connect with that because anybody can go to the pharmacy and he can get that. So also the quote, if you're going to put the quote inside your story, that quote should not repeat text that you have earlier talked about. In fact, from my own experience, when I interview someone, and the interview helps me to understand the context more, and then I get quotes from those interviews. So what you want to do when you're using quotes will be to if you are putting a particular part of that if you are putting a quote inside the your write-up, that's you don't want it to be that you don't want that same statement to have been somewhere before or after the quote, because that's just waste of words. The person that is reading it has read it before, will still read it later, and the person is like, okay, so what exactly is the use of this quote? You need to be sure you need to be sure that you're not repeating the things that have earlier been said. And then the quotes, you can use quotes that express views, feelings, and consequences. For example, that example I gave earlier about malaria, about chloroquine being available over the counter in Nigeria, is talking about the consequences of that particular situation. So the quotes that that you want to share should be things that express the views of stakeholders, people that are being affected or influenced or that affect that particular topic you're talking about. Those are the people you want to include their quotes. Now, I thought that we should really talk about this tuberculosis article again, at least to go through the details of that, because after last week, I was asking myself that would that video do justice as much as this story? So this is the example that we're going to go through. But before we go into that, do we have questions before I just go into this? Questions. If you have a question, can you just raise your hand so that I can call you? Anybody? Okay. Okay, if there's a question, then I think I can continue then. So this particular story, as I said last week, I wrote this story based on a scientific publication by our team here at ASGID. It's on tuberculosis, on the tuberculosis misdiagnosis, essentially, in Nigeria. Okay. So looking at this is the beginning of that story. I didn't want to, I just copied the content of that story. I will just go through it from the beginning to the end, so we don't have to go back and forth. The story says, this is the first paragraph here. Lola was a tuberculosis patient, tuberculosis TB patient who had also tested positive for HIV. Rapid diagnostic tests showed that she had multi-drug resistant, that is MDR TB. You would notice that those words that I inserted, like the acronyms inside bracket, because you don't want to put acronyms. You don't just want to use acronyms that people may not be familiar with. HIV was not defined there because it's a common thing. People know about HIV very well. Now, this is the lead. I use the story for this particular article. So the third sentence, this means that first-line drugs were not effective for our treatments, and second-line drugs were prescribed for her. Our family wondered why our health worsened speedily, and our doctors were baffled that the other drugs were not effective for her. She died of complications from TB and HIV. No, that's a story. Somebody that reads this will likely be like, oh, she had TB, she had HIV. So what happened? The first set of drugs that they gave her didn't work. They gave her the other set. Still, nothing happened. Her health worsened, and then she died. The person will want to check, okay, so what exactly? Why did she die? Now, bringing in context, let's give context to that conversation. Lola was one of the Nigerians for whom the drug resistance of the bacteria that caused TB was misdiagnosed. We're talking about misdiagnosis. The topic talked about misdiagnosis of TB. This is according to research published by scientists at the African Center of Excellence for Genomics of Infectious Diseases, ASGID, and their partners. And what did they use? They used next generation sequencing, NGS. That's they said that the last sentence says the scientists discovered that Lola had extensively drug-resistant TB. Now, initially, the first paragraph says that what their rapid test said was that she had MDR, multi-drug resistant. But using next generation sequencing, they saw that she had extensively drug-resistant TB. So this is context for what the story was at the beginning. So now going to the main body. This is a quote from the lead author, that was from the interview. The interview was longer than this, but you want to just pick what is most fitting for your story. So the lead author said, we used genome sequencing to give the full profile of some samples that were classified as drug resistant and multi-drug resistant. And the sequencing results gave us the understanding of that these samples were extensively drug resistant. The drug resistant TB, said Idowola Iwoyi, the first author of the paper and the PhD research fellow at ASGID. The continuation of that quote says that shows us how often cases like this can be missed. When people go to the hospitals to treat TB, the clinics would give them drugs that would not make them feel better or kill the bacteria because the bacteria is resistant to the drug. Now, this second paragraph here, he was talking about the consequence of the observation, right? And it's still part of the quote. Earlier on, I talked about the fact that a quote can talk about consequences of issues. This is an example of that. Now, this is giving context to what we have been talking about. We talked about tuberculosis at the beginning, and now we are talking about tuberculosis for people to really understand what tuberculosis is. What is the context of tuberculosis? So, talked about the bacteria that causes it. Talked about the symptoms. What it affects that it affects the lungs as well as other parts of the body. Then, what are the symptoms of tuberculosis? We have them there. Now, what's it about about resistance? Before you even get to resistance, we're talking about that the second paragraph here said, as with other disease-causing microorganisms, the TB bacteria expresses changes, that is mutations. I could have said the TB bacteria expresses mutations in its genetic material. Now, somebody that is not a specialist here will be like, now what is mutation? So this is saying that if you're using a technical word, you want to give an explanation to that. I could have also said expresses mutations and then puts changes inside brackets, but I felt, no, use the word that people are familiar with first and then put the technical meaning of that inside brackets. So expresses changes, that is mutations in its genetic material. These changes help it to withstand the drugs used against it. The nature and extent of these changes determine if individual drugs can successfully treat TB in patients. Hence the evolution of the different classes of drug-resistant TB. That explains it. Now, further explanation about XDR-TB, that's extensively drug-resistant TB. We have that here. Now, the next paragraph talks about the sequencing. We said it said that they used next generation sequencing to analyze or to find out the exact type of drug resistance that the TB bacteria had. Now, this is an explanation of what next generation sequencing is all about. And then went back to like context, what happens within the generally within the society when a TB patient breathes, speaks, and coughs. What happens there? That droplets of the tuberculosis bacteria goes out from the mouth and lungs, and then when somebody else inhales that, the person has a potential of getting infected. Now, going to another quote now. This is from a medical doctor, a consultant pulmonologist at a university around here, or a teaching hospital around here. Says when you misdiagnose a patient with drug-resistant tuberculosis, it is a major problem, not just in the local community, but globally. It means that the patients will be treated as a regular TB patient. And when those patients are treated like that, the drugs will not work, and then they're likely going to die. And that was the case with Lola, the person that we talked about at the beginning, in the first story, in the initial story. This is an interpretation of that conversation here. Like what's the interpretation of what drug resistance and all of that. And another interpretation. Then the second paragraph here, it was an interpretation that also brought in another dimension. Unfortunately, Bala's story highlights how misdiagnosis can affect patients and lead to greater TB spread. Now, this is a form of transition that was included. I talked about transition. Now we've talked about somebody that died as a result of the misdiagnosis. Now we're talking about somebody else. I didn't just want to jump into it. So brought in a transition to say Bala's story highlights how misdiagnosis can affect patients and lead to greater TB spread. Now, just like Lola, Bala was diagnosed with rifampicin resistant TB. Hence, they used second-line drugs for him. They prescribed that to him. But when he took this drug, after taking the drugs for a while, he stopped. Why? The drugs had severe side effects on him. And there was no much improvement on his health. Look at it. He was sick. They saw that he had some kinds of drug-resistant TB. They gave him the second-line drugs, but then those ones were actually still wrong because that was not the kind of resistant. I mean, the bacteria that caused his TB was resistant to even those drugs. So finally, what did he do? He left the drug. And look at what would have happened in that kind of situation. The guy just went out. I mean, when he stopped taking the drugs, means that he will continue to go around and cause more infections among people in the society. And this brought in additional context. The two of them lived in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital with over 20 million people. So looking at Lagos, you're asking yourself, so what's how that kind of thing comes into the society, and many people can be affected. The next paragraph, I brought in figures, facts. That in 2019, Nigeria had the 6th largest TB burden in the world. This is facts that this is figure that I added to this, and then we had quotes also. This particular write-up, it's like the call there is to say we need to do more NGS, next generation sequencing, to identify the to identify the particular kind of resistance that TB bacteria that infects people have. So this is a quote now. For surveillance purposes, I think NGS is the way to go because it will not only enable you to identify established markers of MDR, it will also enable you to discover novel mutations that could be associated with extremely resistant organisms, like the ones we found. This was a quote from the director of AceGate on that paper, based on that paper conversation. Now, tuberculosis is a treatable disease. No one should die from tuberculosis. This is a quote also from the medical doctor earlier. Now, the call to action. Anybody that has been coughing for over 2 weeks should come to the hospital where we will conduct a test. Once they do this, we pick it at least TB early, and then they start treating them appropriately. TB drugs are free. This is for somebody that is just reading this and like, okay, that's a call to action for them. And then the conclusion of that story. This story was published around the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. It is important that Nigeria strengthens, or that we strengthen the TB surveillance system in Nigeria. And then next generation sequencing is something that is necessary to accomplish this. This is just to show us how how those things that I talked about earlier were applied. And I think these are some other sources that we can really access for sources of some sources that are accessed for the presentation, and then that we can also access. And then thank you very much. Thank you. I would like to see if we have questions. Do we have questions or comments also? Okay. Osegale said that interesting article. The interest really catches attention. Thank you so much. Thank you. So if you have a question, can you please raise your hand, or you can unmute and ask a question. And if you prefer to send a chat, please drop it. Thank you, Aderonke. Thank you, Angela. Any question, please? Yeah, thank you, Bukolua. Lydia, thank you too. If you want to ask a question, please unmute and ask your question. I wouldn't know if someone is trying to type in the question. Thank you, Asala. Okay. Xiaori said, I can't talk, but I would like to know how to write about the controversy between scientists on a subject, for example, COVID-19. So how do we write about controversies? If you want to write about a controversial topic, and last week I talked about the fact that controversial topics can be topics that, you can find stories from controversial topics. Now, what you should do is your focus should be about presenting different sides of the argument. If you're writing, if you are writing as somebody that just wants to present the fact, you should plan to present the different sides of the argument, such that you are going to give the person that is reading you are going to give the person enough information to make informed decision, or a personal evaluation, and come to like sensible judgments, personal judgment. You don't want to push an agenda. If you're writing a story, it's not like you want to make the person or the people that are reading your story to come to your side, except that is the focus, which that's maybe you want to write something for your organization. Then in that case, your arguments may be something more from the angle of your organization. But if you're just presenting it to to an audience, so to a general public, like not particularly from that you want to defend your angle. So you want to give equal footing to all the different arguments, and you want to also interview people from those different sections, so those different segments of the divide, so that you are not biased. You need to be clear about the argument. So all the different stakeholders, and also there is this part, you need to also be very careful that you don't give a equal foot. Let's say that you don't want to be disproportionate by saying you want to give equal footing to everybody. You don't want to be disproportionate to for example, an idea that is really not maybe something on the fringes. You don't want it to now become the mainstream. You want to be sure that you are not saying you're not in the name of bringing all the dimension, now being disproportionate in a way, in the way you present your arguments or your conversations. Is referencing required in science stories? It's good. That's Selena. It's good you like say, for example, if you're making a quote, you want to say who said what. That is going to give credence to that particular thing you are quoting, to say this person said this, and you also want to add like a designation or the affiliation of that person. For example, if you just say a scientist said a scientist, who is a scientist? Doesn't the scientist have a name? Except the person said, except it's a situation where the person said, shared with you anonymously. So then you can now say that, okay, said so and so, said somebody, maybe a neurologist who spoke under anonymity. Maybe the content, particular subject is something that is controversial. So if it's in that case, then you may not mention the particular person's name. But if it's just you're writing this, if it's a quote, you should talk about the person and the person's affiliation, because that's going to give credibility. Somebody that is reading wants to say, okay, is this person just a specialist, or somebody that is an expert, or somebody just like me, maybe somebody that I even know better than this author went to interview or is quoting. Now, also, I said this last week, if you are writing based on a particular publication, it will be good to maybe put something in that article that will be that the reader can use to connect with the original source of that article. For example, you would want to mention that this, if your outlet permits, you may want to create an hyperlink that can redirect to the original publication. And for example, looking at the references also, you would say reference section like we have in our scientific publications. No, it's not necessary there. It's a story, but you may put something like for further reading on that, so that people that want to read more about that, or you can put sources, additional sources to at the bottom of your write-up. That can be good for people. Okay, Olaiton, thank you very much. Yanulua, thank you. Okay, Akimat. Okay, says your question is that, is there any merit in starting a science story with a question? Okay, something you imagine would be thought-provoking. How does it fit into a lead? Yeah, it's possible to start your story with a question. I said that your lead should be something catchy. So it's if your question can become if your question is if you craft your question in a way that is interesting, if it is surprising, if it is impressive or alarming, then why not? And I may also suggest that you should probably test that question, that lead with people around you, people that maybe that are potential members of the audience, people that like a representative, people that are representatives. You remove everything from your audience. So you should test it. And if it goes well, why not? I've seen articles that started with questions, and it was actually those questions that drew me that I want to find out what exactly or what's the answer to this question. So it's possible. Yeah, thank you, Wealth. Too. All right, thank you, Charlie. Okay, Wealth has a question. How do you tell whether the quotes in an article are too many or not enough? Is there a threshold to keep in mind when writing, especially when you consulted several sources? Well, first, I would ask, you want to check what's the length of your article, the overall article. What's the length of that article? If it's a feature article that is like several thousand words long, then you can be able to add as many quotes as you deem fit. But if it's not that, if it's just a short story, maybe 1 to 2 pages long, let's say 800 to 1,200 words, then you may not want to have so many quotes, because except you're using those quotes to set the context and to explain and to interpret. That means that you are just putting, it's more or less like you just brought quotes from people, but that may not even flow very well with people, because you now need to start like your own words will just be one or two lines or sentences that will connect one quote with another quote, which is possible. That may be very good for experts, people. I mean, for people that are very experienced with writing stories. But if you're just starting out, I would not jump at too many quotes, because you really want to be sure that you are your story is not too long. And remember also I said something earlier that you cannot put everything you know inside the story, everything you know about the topic. You can't put everything there. In fact, I was reading something, was it earlier today? And the person said something like, it was talking about this, the number of story. It was like talking about the length of the article. And this is me paraphrasing. It was like that. If you would just write, if your writing is so lengthy, then you will lose people quite early. I mean, if you put too many things, many more things than are necessary in the body of your article, then you are really gonna lose them. The way he said it was something like this: that writing a story is not as much reducing, it's much more reducing the story, your resources, to like removing those things that are not not particularly compulsory in your story. So your writing of a story was saying that it's much more removing those things that you can remove and leaving those things that are crucial for that conversation. So having consulted several sources, you would want to like streamline them. Which ones must be in this story for the person that is reading to make good sense out of it. Which ones are things that we can let go? So it's like the person was saying, the real work is that trimming down of the bulk of contents that you have. So that's it. I hope I answered that. So I cannot just say this is the number of quotes. Your context will really determine that. Thank you. Is there any other question, please? Okay, Kimas. Okay, thank you. Well, so if we have any other question, please post here. Okay, and I would earlier on I mentioned some things that about what something that is coming up here, and that was the fact that during the first session there was we had a conversation about creating a compendium or having a resource that highlights science communication approaches, case studies out of Africa. And we asked that Linda, one of the panelists, should spearhead that conversation. And I'm happy that one of us here, Wealth, contacted her. And the three of us had a meeting earlier in the week, and we are working towards putting this together. So I want to invite as many people as would be interested in first sharing their thoughts or their experiences, case studies of in relation to science communication. Please feel free to reach out. Reach out to Wealth. Wealth, please drop your email address again so that people can have it. We have two groups of people that we would need. One group will be a group of people that will edit the people's submissions of case studies, and also we also want to have people that want to share their own stories about science communication endeavors, science communication projects that they've been involved with, or that they actually created, contents that they created. And we would want these two groups, and what we are working towards, at least for now, is that we would have all these things created on a website. This same website, the website is, I posted it earlier, scienceonshelved.com. It's still under development. We're still working on it. And this website also, as I mentioned this last week, we are working towards having this website as a place where we can share our own science stories too. Your science communication content, things that you create, you can share them freely on the platform for people to be able to access. And lastly, after we finish this workshop next week, we are going to give ourselves a month to work on different contents, whatever you choose, anything that you want to work with. You would work on it and submit, or if you want to you submit them, you share with us, so that we will converge towards the end of July. By next week, we are going to announce specific dates, most likely something within the range of July 26 to 28. So we are going to come together virtually still, and share our our content, and not just share among ourselves. We are going to work towards making those things public. So between now and then, if you submit what I want, whatever you create, we will share feedbacks, can improve, so that by the time we are showcasing our outputs to the world, then it will be something that is, it's at least it's not raw. It's refined. We've received feedback from others. So that's what we're looking at, because we feel that this should not just become a talk show. We've been talking about things to do. We should be able to practice those things. So that's it. Next week, by God's grace, we are going to be, our topic is how to use multimedia in science communication. And our facilitator for next week is a very experienced film producer, science communicator. He's going to take us through a lot of things. I know that very clearly. I've worked with him in the past, and I am sure that it's going to be a beautiful time together. So if there is any other comments or question, can we just have them? Otherwise, I would stop sharing now. And then I will probably hand you over to Adeoke.
All right, thank you very much, Fikayo. That was insightful. I'm sure we've learned a thing or two. Thank you also everyone who has joined in today. I hope you've had value for your time, and you've also added value to your knowledge on science communication. This seminar is hosted by Alpha Innovation Studios. Next week will be the final session, as earlier announced by Fikayo. Please, I would like us all to spread the word. Let's listen to the other recordings. I'm certain this recording for today will be available shortly in our mail. Please, let's do well to check it out. And also, information has gone out concerning signs on shelf. Let's take advantage of these juicy opportunities coming our way, and also the compendium of our science story. Please use hashtag SciComIntro in your social media post on the workshop. Let's take the word out on social media so that others too can join in. Your connection, your connection, yeah. People your connection can also join in. So thank you very much everyone for joining in today. If you have any more information, if you have any questions, we can ask shortly before we call it a day today. Also, you can tag at my AI studio and at Fikayo Iwale in your post. Thank you. On all social media platforms, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. You can tag at my AI studio and Fikayo Iwale in your post. And also, please use hashtag SciComIntro.
So thank you everyone for coming once again. See you next week. Very delighted that you spent time with us. Thank you so much. I'll stop recording now.